We are Rogue Media Sports.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We are coming to you live from AT&T Stadium, high above the field where the Cowboys dropped a 23-17 wild card loss and to the San Francisco 49ers. And it's a sad day in Mudville. Ed has joined me in our palatial suite up here. What a gorgeous view this is. We've just come from doing all our post-game activities, and I was on one deal, and then I had to run up and do some other stuff. It's always fun to be together. Ed, I was kind of curious. Give me your take on who did you visit with after the game, and what was your kind of take on all the post-game activities?
Well, the Cowboys, did not often resemble the highest-scoring team in the NFL, which they were. They did play to form as the most penalized team in the NFL, and so their season ended unexpectedly and badly with a first-round defeat at home. Mike McCarthy's first Dallas postseason game lost to turnovers and 14 penalties, which makes Dallas the only team in the NFL this year to have two games with 14 or more accepted penalties. And then symbolic of their overall failure, a questionable final play by Dak Prescott that wasn't intended to be the last play of their season at all. I did not do a post-game one-on-one. We usually do that with the winning team. And since nobody at ESPN asked me to get an interview with a 49ers player, I decided that I needed to reach the Cowboys locker room expeditiously and try to make sure I got with Jerry Jones, because I suspect there's going to be, over the next 48 hours and maybe longer, a lot of intrigue about the coaching situation as it pertains not only to Mike McCarthy, but also to Kellen Moore and Dan Quinn, the two play callers who are on a bunch of lists with other teams searching for head coaches and are going to meet with those teams starting this week. And I guess the biggest surprise to me was that and we're going to play this whole Jerry Jones interview so people will hear for themselves. But when I asked him directly about making a coaching change, and I fully expected that he would say that is not going to be a consideration whatsoever, he did not eliminate the possibility of making a head coaching change. And as you and I know, because we just looked it up, he did this once before with Chan Gailey, fired Chan Gailey after his second Cowboys season, went 10-6, went to the playoffs, went 8-8, got fired. And Jerry's always talked about that being one of the great regrets of his 30 years owning the Cowboys. But he might be put in a position where it seemed like he might be put in a position where I have to weigh my willingness to lose Dan Quinn to keep Mike McCarthy. That was my takeaway. I don't know what you thought of it. I don't know what your position is on that kind of deliberation, but I fully expect Jerry to shut that down immediately. And he did nothing of the kind. Instead, he talked about what a great disappointment this was. Couldn't remember being more disappointed by a loss. How unexpected it was. He fully thought this team would win this game against the 49ers at home and advance to Tampa and take on the defending Super Bowl champion Tom Brady and the Bucs. And instead, they're left with this really inexplicable loss that, really so resembled all of the games that the Cowboys played outside their own weak division. And this was a concern that I've expressed for many weeks and months, that playing in a bad division and dominating it and scoring at will like they did does not properly prepare you for playing good teams and meeting big challenges in the postseason like the 49ers posed today.
All right, I kept trying to unmute myself, and but you were on such a roll, I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. I did not want to cut you off, and I appreciate that. There's a lot to get into. I think that's all fascinating, what we were just talking about. Frito, it is time for you to play the music. It is the Doomsday Podcast, and we are pleased to be with you this evening. The season has come to a crushing halt, and it's never good when it ends like this, but especially with a team that the Cowboys thought they might be able to do something with. And I wanted us to start, and Ed Werder and our gather, we've both been at the game, and we've been down covering the interviews. And Ed was right in front of Jerry. I was behind Jerry. So I have all the stuff recorded, a lot of the stuff recorded, Ed, but I don't know what he said. I couldn't really hear from back there. Ed was in a good position, so we'll have all that audio that will play for you here in a little bit so you can hear for yourself.
I want to ask you one question about that. Did the back of his head look as angry as the front of his face? He was kind of red back there. So I think there was some anger. There was also another anger involved in this game. That was the punter Brian Anger, who hit the video board. What a ridiculous place this is. I love the palatial AT&T Stadium, but there were some things about that stadium today that were very weird. Frito, I can hear you if you don't mind muting yourself. So there's just a lot to talk about. One thing, Ed, I want to get you on though immediately that our people are going to want to hear is the final 14 seconds. What did Dak say about it, and how bad a decision do you think that was considering the circumstances? Well, I fully expected once they got to about midfield that the strategy would be to throw one or two Hail Marys into the end zone and hope to make a play, or more likely get a pass interference penalty, since the 49ers secondary has 23 pass interference penalties, the most in the NFL, 7 more than any other team. So that seemed to me to be a reasonably good strategy to try to pull this game out at the very end. Instead, they have a play that they insisted that they practiced on Fridays and Saturdays in situational football, where, the opponent's protecting the outside, trying to prevent anybody from making any yards and getting out of bounds, leaving the middle relatively open. So the Cowboys, with no timeouts, engaged in this risky bit of strategy, calling a quarterback draw. And Dak Prescott thought he got down with like 4 seconds left. He was bumped by the official who was trying to spot the ball. They should probably, instead of giving the ball to Tyler Biadasz, the center, Dak should have given it to the one of the officials to set the ball down and start the play, because it can't. The next play can't start till an official has set the ball. And so that was the beginning of their undoing. And then there was a collision with the official, a member of the officiating crew, while he was trying to get the ball snapped. And it was ultimately determined. Mike McCarthy said he thought that they were going to have time put back on the clock by review officials up in New York. Didn't happen. And so they never got to snap the ball again. And, obviously that was a clear misjudgment and poor execution to me, it was poor execution of a bad idea. They would say it was poor execution of a good idea, and one that they practiced successfully.
All right. And Ed, we've come to expect this team to do the get down, and then at the end put up a valiant comeback attempt. That does not make up for this team showing up seemingly unprepared today. Ed, you were talking to the San Francisco before and I like some of your stuff. In fact, I was retweeting some of the stuff that you talked to Kyle Shanahan. It turns out the new PR guy for the 49ers, is a longtime friend of ours, and that guy Corey Rush is a great guy. But anyway, I like some of the stuff you gathered from them. I would say that before we get into the future of Mike McCarthy, because our people do want to hear some discussion with that and what we think is going to happen with these coordinators, I would just ask you about that first half today. Mike said something. McCarthy said something that made me kind of like scratch my head, where he said something along the lines of, "I thought we settled in at halftime. I thought we settled into the game." It was 16-7 at that point, and it really did not become a game until late. And the Cowboys somehow kind of fought back in it, and then had a shot at the end. But it was a pitiful start to that game, and they really weren't ready on either side of the ball. It didn't seem to me.
It was kind of like the Denver loss and the Raider loss, in that they did nothing for 3 quarters. They were badly outplayed for the first 3 quarters of the game. And then all of a sudden they got interested, inspired, and thought they, had a reasonable chance to come back and win the game. Even though the odds will tell you, the last 13 times a team has gotten a 13 or greater point lead in the playoff game, they've won. They've closed out their opponent, as the 49ers did today. I think the 49ers were a tough matchup because I think they are a good team. They play good defense. They rush the passer. They run the football exceptionally well, and they're very determined in that regard. And Kyle Shanahan made left no doubt that was going to be their strategy. And, they have Deebo Samuel, who's a wild card. He can line up anywhere, but he led the NFL among wide receivers with 8 rushing touchdowns, and he had a huge game against the Cowboys today, a big 26-yard touchdown run in the second half. But Shanahan made it clear that, I'm going to make their pass rushers play the run, and I'm going to make Trayvon Diggs, who wants to intercept passes, I'm going to make him tackle in the open field. And he said, and I don't think they're going to want to do it because I wouldn't want to tackle our guys, And so that was his approach. And, they were the more physical team for 3 quarters. And the Cowboys, I'm a little disturbed by this offensive pattern of they just can't seem to make any play. Nothing is ever as designed. There's never a quick drop by Dak and an immediate throw to somebody who's open and makes yards after the catch. Somehow they struggle to get Amari Cooper involved. Somehow, CeeDee Lamb goes an entire half without a catch. And I know he was like 1 for 5 at one point in terms of catches versus targets. They have no running game. They've never been able to fix that. The offensive line couldn't pass protect to save their lives. Dak completed under 50% of his passes with 4-man pressure. And remember, they didn't have Nick Bosa for more than half the game, and they didn't have Fred Warner, their best linebacker, for the final quarter of the game, and the Cowboys still couldn't win the game, and they still couldn't dominate on offense.
Yeah, I do. I agree with a lot of that. I think the Bosa point's a great one. You know how unbelievable a player he is, and to keep him he was completely removed from that game. They still ended up with 5 sacks. Cowboys were not getting the pressure. Occasionally they would almost get home, but it just didn't. They never got in a rhythm. They finally late, like you say, Brown had the big interception. Jimmy G tried to kind of let them back in. But, I guess the way I would take this, Ed, right now, as we sit here at AT&T Stadium, you and I both have admired this quarterback and his leadership abilities, talking about Dak Prescott. He's now, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, 1-3 in the postseason, in the playoffs. This was the worst of his playoff games. They're down 16-7, and he throws one to Cedric Wilson behind him. We don't know exactly where Ced was supposed to be on that one, but again, really bad interception that leads to the 23-7 deficit. So while it's nice to see that he can get you back in a game, kind of like we used to say with Tony, he'll also sort of put you in the spot where you have to do that. You have to come back, and I just kind of what we were talking to Jerry about after the game. You got this guy you're paying huge amount to, and his numbers look great this season. But we both know when you trust your eyes, it was a very uneven season.
Yeah, I mean, I give him credit for coming back from that horrific season-ending injury a year ago and throwing 37 touchdown passes, the most in franchise history. I don't think when he was drafted we ever expected him to be breaking Tony Romo's passing records. I give him credit for leading an offense that scored a franchise record, 530 points in his first season as the highest paid player in franchise history. But again, I think that's, kind of an illusion because they scored 50 points against two teams in their own division and they scored 43 against Atlanta. And so they weren't the prolific offense that their numbers suggested, at least not on a week-to-week basis. And, I talked about this pattern last week when they went into Philly and they put up, 50 points and won the game decisively. And McCarthy talked about that creating momentum and confidence. And this, these guys were coming in firing and they're going to be great in the postseason. And I question that on the basis of, they scored 43 points against Atlanta, which was their season high at the time, went outside the division, lost the next week. They scored 56 points, their season high against Washington, went outside the division and lost the next week. And now they've done the same thing here. They scored 50 points against Philadelphia, go outside the division in the playoff game against San Francisco, and not only lose, but struggle to score. And, one of the, I guess Ezekiel Elliott, made the point that he's been playing with a torn posterior cruciate ligament in his leg. That's why he's been wearing the knee brace and has never seemed quite right. But I just don't think Tony Pollard got enough chances in this game. I know talking to Kyle Shanahan before the game that he said, hey, I put on the tape and the guy who is a lot better player than I thought he was is Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard's a hard-nosed runner and he's got home run speed. And there were times in this game today where Zeke was in the backfield when they were trying to come from behind. And I think you can only justify that if you're using him to blitz pickup. If you're going to throw the back who gets thrown the ball should be Tony Pollard. And there were too many times in this game where Zeke didn't block. He ran a route and Elliott, the Dak threw him a ball and didn't make the play. Why is that not Tony Pollard? I don't understand their use of Tony Pollard this year. It's one of the great mysteries, I guess. And I also think that it's so ridiculous that how often they play 6 and 7 offensive linemen trying to run the football. Well, first of all, you're telling the opponent when you have an extra offensive tackle or two extra offensive tackles that we're going to run the football. And if you try and cross them up and say, hey, guess what? You think we're going to run the football? We're not. Guess what? We don't have any receivers because we have all these fat guys out on the field. It's the most preposterous way to play offense that I've ever seen.
Got all the fat guys out there. McGovern's lined up he's in the backfield. Maybe they're worried they're going to hand it to McGovern. He'll just run over a bunch of people out there. This is, I agree. It's strange. I watched, I was watching their running game, for instance. So whether it was Debo, whether it was Mitchell, whoever was back there today, a lot of what they would do was this motion, and there was so much motion. And
77% of the time they run motion. That's the highest percentage in the NFL, even higher than Kansas City by like 10%.
And yeah, guess who's bad at stopping teams that use motion in the running game?
11 guys in Dallas uniforms with stars on their helmets.
Yeah. It was a struggle for the Cowboys. Debo Samuel. Kind of to your point, Ed, we were kind of talking about this earlier. You just when they hand the ball off, they'll disappear for a little bit, and the guy will emerge for 9 or 10 yards, and then they'll run a screen, and then the guy will sort of disappear in traffic, and it'll dart out, and they'll have 15 yards. They hit on several key third down conversions in the first half. And again, the Cowboys were out of this game seemingly and then fought their way back in. And that's kind of what they do time and time again. But the game was lost in a lot of ways in the first half. So I don't know. I find it interesting that McCarthy thinks he's fine. Like McCarthy, I'm not saying he wasn't haughty about it, but he was just kind of like, got no concern.
Never occurred to me that Jerry would be making a coaching change. We should probably let people listen to the Jerry interview in its entirety and then discuss his comments and the situation as it pertains to the coaches.
I'm disappointed for our fans. They deserved us to win this game tonight, and they deserved us to go farther. So it was quite a letdown. And we've got good players in there, really good players. And but San Francisco really played well. And but even at that, they did play well. They outplayed us. But at the end, we still left ourselves a chance, and just very disappointing that we couldn't get it done. I would like to say that when I look at the year, I feel one way. But the year, a big part of it, when you got a team like this, is winning tonight, and we didn't get her done tonight. That's big time disappointing.
As much as you put into this, can you just talk about that hurt?
Well, I think I'm satisfied that a lot of people gave what they could give out there tonight, and gave what they did to get here. But again, we had a team that all year would basically disappoint to some degree and then turn around and show. And that this was a game that we needed to show, and we didn't need to, against a team like San Francisco, as solid a team as they are. No matter how good we look on paper, we needed to make this happen. And I'm really disappointed for our fans. They really deserve to see this team advance on into the playoffs.
Is there any possibility of you making a coaching change?
I don't even want to discuss anything like that at this particular time. No discussion about anything.
Coming out down 13-0. Did this team look unprepared today?
Again, I'm not going to discuss coaching, the preparation, any of those things. That's not on the table. The game speaks for itself. San Francisco really, I thought the score was not indicative of the game, but the way our team fought back and got back in the game gave us a chance to give a shot there. I was really proud of.
What'd you think?
But this is one of the best group of players that I've been around.
You talk about struggling against teams like San Francisco. Your team just couldn't beat those teams that had the top wins. What do you think?
Well, again, that's going to be the story that when you got to those top echelon teams. But I'm really proud of the makeup of this team, and as you well know, we had about as good of putting it together and good fortune with some of the decisions we made. We had it come together about as good as you could do it, and we had it come together with about as healthy as you can be. So I'm satisfied this team gave it our best shot.
What do you think about the call, or the way the game ended, the quarterback draw and not getting to snap the ball again as opposed to throwing at the end zone from the 50?
Again, I think we all were really the way the flow of the game was going. Then I was the team shouldn't have been in a position for that last play to be something controversial. So I'm not going to make it something bigger than it is. We got ourselves in a spot there very early on. Wasn't that we didn't anticipate what San Francisco could do and how they were going to play us. I don't think we saw any surprises out there tonight.
Jerry, what does 14 penalties say about?
You're down 23-7. You come back. You get the ball in your quarterback's hand. With 3 minutes left in the game, 23-17 with a chance to win. A $40 million quarterback. Can you talk about your thoughts and how he played today?
Listen, we have a team that I'm proud of how it came together. The combination of the way the young players were stepping up, the way the free agents were playing, our health, the way the team was coached throughout the year, the way we got ready to play this game, and we just didn't make it. And this has to be when we look at our team, as proud as we are of the makeup of the team, and we are, that changes as we look ahead. But as proud as we are of that, but we've got to understand that we lost this first playoff game, and we lost to a good team. We lost to a good team, but I really did not give it as a given, but I thought we'd go out here and win this game tonight.
How maddening is it to struggle with the penalties?
It's not maddening. It's not maddening. I mean, all of the things that caused us to be sitting here losers, as losing the game, all of those things, I understand them. I've been around it all my life and understand how it happened. I will say this is one of the best teams that I've been a part of that this happened to.
What does 14 penalties say about this football team, especially given the struggles?
Well, again, I don't want to go there. You'll say plenty about that, and say you'll talk about the discipline, and you'll talk about all those kinds of things. And I know that that's there, but this is extremely, extremely disappointing and surprising that we didn't win this first playoff game for me.
What do you think this team was missing?
And for our fans.
What do you think this team was missing, as talented as it was?
Well, again, we obviously didn't make the kinds of plays. We were very fortunate to be in it right at the end. The way the game had gone, that early part of that game, when they basically San Francisco was playing the way they were playing, that was as dominant of football on the other side of the ball, with the other team that I've been a part of. And so our team held its head high. They came back, they competed, and they stayed in it to the end. But I'm just disappointed that we were in that spot. And I don't think, I didn't think that our personnel and our plan and how we basically the makeup of not only the personnel but our season, I didn't think I was going to be standing here with you tonight visiting like this for sure.
You talk about
this is why you paid that $40 million.
The hump is advancing in the playoffs.
Right.
And there have been some good quarterbacks not advance in the playoff. I'm just sick we're one of them.
You talk about
really sick.
I'm
surprised and sick.
Where do you start tomorrow? Yourself personally.
Well, the NFL is pretty clear. It's got some pretty rigid procedures, and the team is dismissed tomorrow. And will be before the afternoon's over. So that's the way it goes.
You talk about how talented this group was. What can you say about the window you see for this team, especially with certain changes possibly coming with your coordinators and whatnot?
Well, I think this is a time that when you get this combination of players together, you need to have success, because we all know how it goes in the NFL. The whole thing is set up to take away from the best and add to the ones that need improvement. And personnel-wise, I think we have one of the best.
When was the last time you were this disappointed after a loss?
I can't remember.
Okay, there it was Jerry Jones and Ed. We were both there. You got to Jerry earlier than I did, and we're asking about these things. You alluded to it earlier. You were a little bit surprised at how Jerry didn't immediately sort of shoot down the idea of making a change. He just basically, let me ask you this. Did you, and we just let our folks hear all that, did you think he was sort of being dismissive of the question? Or do you think he was just kind of like, I'm just more disappointed than anything. I just don't want to talk about that right now. Like, how long will Jerry need to kind of think on this?
Look, Jerry Jones has been the owner and general manager of the franchise for over 30 years. He's hired and or fired or retired every coach this franchise has ever had, starting with Tom Landry. And he knows the gravity of a question about making a coaching change. And so the way I read what he said was, you know what? He hasn't ruled it out yet. And until he does, he's not going to say he has. And the thing that kept, I think the recurrent theme in his comments that everybody just listened to was just how devastating a loss this was in his mind, how unexpected this was. He didn't see this coming. He doesn't think it was necessary. He doesn't like that. The Cowboys in his mind had way too much talent for this to happen to them in the first round of the playoffs at home against a lower seeded team, even though San Francisco is a quality team. He thinks they had more talent than their opponent. He was sure they were going to win this game. Never questioned whether they would win the game. And then to be so disappointed in the way they played on top of losing the game, he just can't reconcile that right now, I don't think. So to me, he kept excusing the roster. Now, and maybe that's the general manager in him. That's what he's done. I hired the coach. I'm responsible for, putting the roster together to a certain degree. I consider myself responsible for that. Whether you want to think I am or I'm not, I consider myself responsible for that. And I will tell you that as the general manager, I think we had great talent on this football team. And yet we had this horrifically disappointing loss. And I'm not getting ready to say yet what I'm going to do with my coaches. And he might have some difficult choices to make because it's not like, well, I can just stand pat here and bring everybody back. Again, he might not want to lose Kellen Moore. He might not want to lose Dan Quinn. So how much do you value those guys versus this coach in Mike McCarthy, who you hired to win a Super Bowl because he's done that before? He's gone to 4 conference championship games. And now, last year you can call it whatever you want it to be. It was an abomination, and he has something to do with it because he hired the defensive coordinator, Mike Nolan, who was fired after one season. He also found Dan Quinn. Jerry and Steven have both given him credit for that hire. But now he has decisions to make as to who he's willing to lose and at what cost. And what are his other options? How much do you value what Dan Quinn did with this defense? How much do you like him as a personality? How much do you like him in front of the microphone being the face of your football team? This is a guy who's been to a Super Bowl as a head coach himself. So I think Jerry has not yet decided how he wants to proceed, and he expressed himself honestly in that regard.
Okay, I think the next question would be if you were going to keep one of those coaches, or you were going to decide who you value the most, who would it be? And I would say right now, we didn't think this was going to happen before the season, but the defense became the biggest part of this team. And they became, the biggest playmakers. They controlled everything. So I would say if you're going to keep one of those two coaches and make him the head coach, it would likely be Dan Quinn. Now, he's had Kellen Moore around here longer. Do you sense that he has loyalty to one of those guys over the other?
I think that, when did he sign McCarthy to a 5-year contract? I believe so. He has 3 years left on his contract. I think that I think any owner, general manager, I think any group of personnel people would want to build on what Dan Quinn has created on defense with these players. And the only way to do that is to make him the head coach. We'll see if he gets offered another job. I'm pretty sure Dan Quinn's going to get offered a head coaching job, whether it's a job that he thinks is one he can succeed at. And he'll have to believe that because this is going to be his second chance and you don't usually get a third chance. So I think he'll be very discriminating about it, but if that opportunity is there, I think he'll take it. Kellen Moore, I'm less sure now that he's going to get a head coaching opportunity in the current cycle. So you might be able to keep both your play callers if you're willing to move on from Mike McCarthy, but you might be able to keep Kellen Moore and lose Dan Quinn if you keep Mike McCarthy. So I know they value what McCarthy, the program that he's put in place overall, but he's not a play caller. He hasn't excelled at the game strategy part of it. And so I tend to think Jerry's probably going to keep Mike McCarthy, but I think it's a tough question to resolve, because I think Dan Quinn is really valuable. And I don't know how big a step backwards you take on defense if you don't have it.
All right. What resonates with me is this whole Gailey thing. Jerry tends to think back on all those times, and I just think he would feel awful firing a guy that they had a 12-win season. Okay, I don't know if he can live with himself doing that, but 6 of the wins were against these dreadful division opponents, and they haven't beaten a good team since New England in October 17th. Ed, does that sound right? I mean, is that the last, other than the Eagles, is that the last playoff team they beat?
Yeah, I believe that's true. And, to the point about their domination in the NFC East, which we saw how badly the Eagles were outplayed today by Tampa Bay, even though Tampa Bay's down their 2 of their best receivers and lost 2 starting offensive linemen during the game. They still dominated the Eagles for most of the game, but the Cowboys were 6-0. And the point differential, in other words, the number of points they scored versus the number they gave up on average while going 6-0 was 22.2 points per game. That's against the NFC East. Outside the NFC East, going into today's game, they were 6-5, and the point per game differential was only 3.6. So now they're 6-6, and the point differential is probably less than 3. So that just tells you they aren't that good a team. They don't beat good teams, and they dominate a bad division. And that's really it. They're bullies of a bad division. And really, that's pretty much what they've been all year, with the notable exception that you mentioned, beating Bill Belichick. They beat the Chargers in week 2 out there. I thought that Chargers were going to prove to be a good team. They missed the playoffs, so they weren't that good a team. But to me, that's kind of the signature of this season. It's going to be, you dominated your division. You were undefeated, the only team in the NFL to win all your division games, and you won them handily, scored the most points in history against your division. But outside the division, you were 6-6, and you lost 4 games at home, including this one.
Yeah, it really is amazing when you think about it, and think about, Ed, what we thought about this team at the juncture about that time I mentioned.
When they're 6-1
after New England, they're 6-1, and when everybody's talking about the Super Bowl. Ed, one thing I need to talk about is our partners, Hodges Capital. They have this Hodges private client, and Hodges family has enjoyed long history in the money management business. Unbelievable group, and this private client that they have. In fact, you can go to HodgesPrivateClient.com, and Ed is tremendous. They've been great partners to us, but they're so good at doing this and helping people with their retirement that they bring in Craig Hodges to be on CNBC. And so he appears regularly on that. They bring him to New York, and we are so proud to partner with them. Again, the way to get, if you are someone who's looking at trying to grow your retirement and you want them to take a look at things, what I would do is go to HodgesPrivateClient.com. All right. That's Craig Hodges, great friend of mine, and just done a tremendous job. All right. Here's what we got to do right now. We are going to let you hear from one of the angriest men in all of Cowboys fandom, or whatever it is he does. He is a big-time analyst. It is Glenn Stretch Smith with his stretch marks. Well, people were already on Twitter wondering what Stretch was going to do to this team. Stretch, first of all, it's always tough, man. You've coached in the NFL. You've been a scout. That last game, whether it's playoffs or whatever, there's always a tremendous sort of feeling of just and Jerry said it. Jerry said he's incredibly let down. He doesn't. It's as low as he can remember being. But the one thing I'll say to you, Stretch, is, and I want you to kind of react to this. I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked by how they came out and played. Like I sometimes you got to just go. Whoever just said they are who we thought they were. Like this is kind of who they are. At least it's my thought after that game.
I mean, when you go into the playoffs, Matt, you don't expect, whether you're in the NBA or the NFL or the NHL. I mean, you don't expect that the intensity level is going to be turned up any. You don't expect that guys are going to be playing kind of letting it all hang out. The thing that concerns me is this football team did not match the intensity, not in the first half. And I thought, okay, after kind of getting their feet up under him, getting in the locker room, I thought, okay, they're going to take this second half kickoff, and they are going to come out, kind of play with that, with that intensity. And they chose not to do it. And that's the thing I think that's so frustrating. You combine that with, I'll sit here and we could go through it. It's on some podcast. I'll go through your 1 to 53 roster, and I'll tell you this roster is as good as anybody in the NFL. So I'm a little shocked that you say that doesn't surprise you. Number one, that they didn't come out and play with a more, gas in your give-a-shitter, and you got one of the best rosters in the league.
Yeah, well, part of it for me is when's the last time they played well against a good team? I mean, I think you have to go back to October 17th against the Patriots when they actually played a playoff team and looked good. It's been a long, long time. And I got to say, you're one of the ones who said, hey, don't get infatuated with what they did against Philly or Washington, all these second stringers. And this is a team that got fat off a division. Okay, they won 6 of their 12 games against horrible NFC East teams. So now, Stretch, let me ask you this though. Let's talk about a couple of plays in this game. They get back in the game. Okay, God love them. This is what they do. They're always up 20. They're down 22-7 against Arizona. Well, they frantically get back in the game. This game, they're down 23-7. They somehow get back in the game. What do you have any explanation for when Dak took off to run? Did that seem like a bad, poor decision, or did you agree Mark McCarthy was blaming it on the refs for not getting the ball set and not giving them an opportunity to get that play off? How did you see that final play of the game?
Well, I mean, I know that when it's, when you've got 14 seconds there, I mean, you're absolutely playing with fire. I also know that when you look at the film, I mean, they were so heavy deep and heavy outside. The middle of the field was wide open, and I get it. I mean, but you've got to be smarter and from a clock management standpoint to know that if you run the ball, you do not have time to get your offensive line set, let the officials set the ball and snap the football and get any kind of time. To me, I don't understand the call. I understand what they were thinking, but the time was not in their favor, and that it was a really poor decision at a really poor time.
All right. Stretch, as you get ready to kind of look back, we got to look forward a little bit. Do you sense that changes are going to be made? Do you have to? Jerry tonight was kind of saying, no, he didn't want to talk about that. McCarthy told the media, we were all talking to him, and he said, I don't have any concerns. Like, he seems to feel pretty safe. You watch this game. You have a good pulse for this staff, it seems. At times, I'm afraid the Cowboys think you have too good a pulse. Do you have a sense of what's about to happen here?
I mean, I think Jerry has, he's kind of at his older age. He's not going to as quickly, kind of come up with some knee-jerk statements right after the football game. How do you justify firing a coach at 112 games? The bottom line is this football team was not ready to play. And when you have as good of players as they have, and you don't win a playoff game, I don't know how your job is not in jeopardy or they're not discussing what to do about that situation. Then I combine that with you have a defensive coordinator who's got head coaching experience, comes in here and makes an unbelievable transformation into a defense, brings some free agent players with him from Atlanta who contribute big time. And everybody in the league is, considering him, or the 7 openings that are out there, considering him to be the head coach. And you've got a young offensive coordinator who I believe showed today he needs to be an offensive coordinator for a few more years in the league. But I do believe that, Jerry's the kind of guy that's not going to want those 2 guys just to walk out of the building. And when the season ended the way it did, when your team was not prepared, 14 penalties, the things that couldn't run the football, it's your offensive line coach that you wanted to bring in here, creation of angles. They did not create good angles. I mean, you watch San Francisco run the football, everything's about angles. Whether they're running toss sweep outside, whether they're running inside zone, whether they're running split side or split back paint. I mean, all the things that they were running, and you don't do that. And so I think when they go back and they look at this film and they evaluate how this season ended with a healthy football team. Now, we didn't know about Zeke's injury. Tyron, I'm not sure how banged up he was, but when you go out and you play with a thud, that's number one. Your fans have the red ass. I mean, I've never seen Cowboy fans throw garbage at their own team. I think the level of I mean, I don't know how to say it in a different way. Red ass, the level of that is something that is, I think Jerry's going to have to take into consideration. And I do think that certainly they're going to, everybody's job is going to be under a microscope as we look at this. And the other thing is, while we're on this Zoom, do you have to lean in like that so your head looks like a damn bastard cat on here?
This is a good look I got going tonight. I've been through the ringer today, man. I've had church and I've done a lot of work today, as you know, and then really worked hard up in that press box. Had a couple of free meals today. Had a pretty good halftime spread. But I got to say this, though. I mean, they didn't get any pressure today. They got no sacks on Jimmy G. And to your point, by the way, all that running they did, they had all kinds of motion. I mean, it just looks like they're doing more stuff. We talked about, are the Cowboys going to be able to run it all? Heck no, they weren't. One team ran for like 165 or 170 yards. One team ran for about 70 yards. That's it. That's how the thing went. So I mean, I don't know. I hear you talking about all this talent. It's just hard for me to watch that mess they put out there. I am glad we're on the same page about not like rewarding them for some kind of late comeback, because that's just what they do. They love a crazy late comeback. Let me ask you this. Was the quarterback, was he just off today? I mean, was this like one of those performances where he just kind of, I mean, that was a horrible behind Cedric on the interception that led to the 23-7 lead. What'd you think of the way Dak played?
Yeah, I mean, he was confused. San Francisco gave him some looks. He never got comfortable, certainly in the pocket. I mean, I don't care what they say, and we've said this on the podcast, Matt. I don't think he is not 100%. He may be structurally okay. We've heard all the slogans about that, but I don't think he's completely healthy, and it's hard to really be difficult on him. Yes, he missed some throws, and then he makes a great throw to, Cedric Wilson. The ball gets stuck right in the sun. He made a great, seam throw right there late in the game. He's just inconsistent with what he's doing, and I think it's still part of the injury that he had, and then I'm going to attribute that to the ball that he threw in the overtime against New England, where he came down kind of funky on that same Achilles. Nobody's going to convince me that he's 100%. Even when you saw him run that touchdown in, I mean, it was painful to watch him run. And so I hope that and he will. He's a hardworking kid. He'll continue to rehab. But I think, in summation with this thing right here, Matt, when you look at how the head coach did not have the team prepared, how they were not, they did not do a good job of blocking up front, defense adequate. Head coach gets an F. That's the bottom line.
Whoa. An aggressive F for the head coach. And what do you give the owner for the way he built the stadium to where you can't even, before the half, 3:30 football game, and your receiver doesn't ever see a throw because the sun's right in his eyes. As a coach, do you have to plan for that? I mean, how bad? I mean, that's just embarrassing. I mean, the receiver never saw the ball, and it was a key moment.
You think they should have turned that stadium facing a little different direction, Mosley?
Yeah.
Is that the point you're making?
Most high school stadiums have figured that out over the years, and I would even say you could put some curtains. You could put some curtains up there or shades or whatever. I mean, but it's an embarrassment to go into a playoff game in an indoor stadium and have the sun get in somebody's eyes.
Well, you make a good point, Mosley. I'll give you a chance to go on a rant and let you kind of lean into the camera and take a look at your teeth and see if you can get all that macaroni and cheese out of there that you ate at halftime. So yeah, it looks. Matt, the bottom line is this team, for whatever reason, and I can't explain it. I mean, they cannot seem to get over these playoff woes, and it is one of those things where I think that Jerry's going to have to take a look at the job he's doing, and they're going to have to look at this organization top to bottom.
I agree with you. You can watch Stretch on WFAA Channel 8, and Stretch, I'm going to be sending you a bottle soon. Among other things, I'm getting ready to send you of Goodness Steak Seasoning. In fact, today I was at Burger House, and they have their own seasoning that they sell. And I told my wife, I said, you know what? I like Goodness Steak Seasoning more than I like Burger House seasoning. And I've loved Burger House seasoning for many, many years. And Goodness Steak Seasoning is now starting to appear at grocery stores. We're going to take it into Central Texas. Some of the H-E-B properties is going to start cropping up. The way you get to it is bringthetasty.com. That's bringthetasty.com. And for this podcast, if you purchase some and send me the purchase order, you will get a free Doomsday podcast t-shirt. So anyway, it's a great seasoning. I really like it. Jason Below's a good friend of ours. He's actually with us tonight. Stretch, I would recommend it. You're a man who loves a good grill. And I would say Goodness Steak Seasoning is something you should try out.
Well, you've been promising to send me some since Shep was a pup, and he's a big old dog right now. So I'm still waiting on it, and hopefully it shows up pretty soon here.
All right, I sent some to old Ed. If Ed doesn't get things, he gets a little irritated. Stretch, take one last look at that hair, buddy. That is some good stuff. Thank you.
I'm telling you right now, Mosley, that might be that. I'm telling you, you look seriously. It looks like a really bad Rick Ocasek. That's all I can think.
People don't know who that is. Rick Ocasek. What in the world is that about? To me, it looks like kind of a young George Harrison. Thank you very much. Okay, get out. Get back. It is the Beatles. Okay, Stretch, all my best, buddy. Hey, are you going to wear that shirt on TV tonight?
Yeah, I've worn it off. I've worn it every podcast, and I thought I'd keep it going. Thanks for timing in there. I didn't realize I was talking to Bucky Yves St. Laurent. See you later, Mosley.
Neck's getting a little big there. Okay, good night from far north Dallas. I think the podcast is actually still going. All right, that is Stretch Mark. All right, there he was. And Ed, I think Stretch kind of thinks like you do. I mean, where he differs is he really thinks something's going to happen. There will be a shakeup. Now, could that, and he just can't. He does not see any way you stand pat with Mike McCarthy. And obviously, I think you and I just don't see him firing. Now, all of us have had you've been around him forever. Actually, Stretch was around Jerry for a pretty good while. I just don't see it happening. Ed, what do you think would be the timetable on something like this?
I mean, I tried to get a sense from Jerry. I asked him, what was next? What would he do tomorrow? And he said, pretty much they dismissed the team after a meeting tomorrow, early afternoon, late morning. And how long he wants to take sitting down and talking to Mike McCarthy about, his view of what happened and what went wrong. And, you heard Dak Prescott, didn't mince words. He said, you play for the Cowboys, it's Super Bowl or nothing. And this is that they underachieved and it sucks is what he said. And so Jerry's got to take that into consideration. I mean, I think for him, it's all about, what am I going to do that, advances us, improves our chances of not having this happen again next year. And is he willing to give up on Mike McCarthy and pay him tens of millions of dollars to go away? I don't know. I think but the fact that he didn't say it without equivocation, it couldn't happen, tells me it could. And I think it's a dangerous business to second guess or try and guess along with what Jerry Jones is going to do. I think he's a totally unpredictable guy. And I got the very clear sense today that he was angered by this loss today. And he was going to think about things that he didn't expect to be thinking about in the next few days. How long that takes, I don't know. To some degree, it's out of their control because other teams are going to start coming in and interviewing Kellen Moore and Dan Quinn, and that's going to sort of force a decision by Jerry, I think.
And Dak Prescott was asked about I guess he said the fans shouldn't have been throwing the stuff, and then he was told that maybe it was at the refs for the calls and all. And then I think he kind of quipped, well, I guess it's okay. That's fine then. Is any backlash coming for Dak on that, do you think?
I think one of the unfortunate things that we've seen happen here in the end of the season is the Cowboys players' willingness to complain about the officiating and the role that it played in games that they didn't win. I think Mike McCarthy makes a point, going into games about how they're likely to be officiated so that his players are prepared accordingly. But I think too often now after games, he's used it as a justification for their failure, and that the players have now, been willing to publicly comment about what they view to be poor officiating. And I think it did reflect badly on Dak. I mean, I've heard that today. I thought initially it was funny what he said, because originally the question was posed to him, with the point being that Cowboys fans were booing and throwing debris on the field, and like DeMarcus Lawrence got hit by it. And he said they weren't directing it at me. It was the officiating. And then when Dak was told that, he amended his comment and he made the flippant remark, like you said, something like, well, I guess it's okay then, or that's right on, or something like that. And he noted the officials ran off the field like they were, to protect their reputations and their safety. They ran off the field as fast as they could. I think it's a very unbecoming look of an NFL team to have prominent players and the head and coaches complain about the officiating, whether it's right or it's wrong. It is what it is. You don't usually lose games specifically because of officiating. And most competitors do not want to be caught dead complaining publicly about that and citing the officials as being a reason for their own failure.
All right. And the Cowboys have been caught several times recently. I think the last time was against Arizona, complaining quite a bit about the refs. And it's been fun. I appreciate Frito Nation Productions for everything Frito's done for us. And tremendous job all season, traveling to all these games and working incredibly long hours, and then still coming up and doing this. And I want to thank Jim and Sally Nation for becoming our providing a suite for us to do this after games, after some of these home games. The Nation family, there's a great family and great friends of mine. I also want to say one thing about powertothrive.net. Appreciate the motivational tools and teachings of one Rich Cavness. We appreciate Rich so much for what he's done. And in fact, my the Power to Thrive books that I've been giving out to people love it. And it's made a big impact on their lives. And some just really cool stuff that you can do and apply to your life. There's so many applicable things. And I've kind of been inspired by it. 2 Timothy 1:7. In fact, Ed's going to go home right now, get a bite to eat, and get in the good book. Get in the good word, and he'll check out 2 Timothy 1:7. Thank you, Rich Cavness, for what you do. Go to powertothrive.net and put your email in, and he'll send you a free book. And he'll be glad to do it. Rich is a good guy and a good speaker. I mean, my gosh, we ought to have him on this podcast. The man can really speak. Ed, I appreciate everything.
I want to make one final point, Matt, to contextualize where the Cowboys stand as we finish this podcast. They have gone 11 straight playoff appearances without reaching a conference championship game. That's the longest such stretch by any team since the creation of the AFC and NFC. In other words, since the merger in 1970. And Dallas has been one and done in 7 of those 11 playoff appearances over that span. So they've now eclipsed the Chiefs, having failed to make a conference championship game after making the playoff field in 11 consecutive appearances. The Chiefs were at 10. The Dolphins were at 9. The Cowboys now hold the record.
To leave it to Ed to come up with something like that. Appreciate it, everybody. All right, that's all we have.
Mosley, your headphones working?
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.